Hi Year 9, welcome back to these learning videos. Today we're looking at mask motifs. So when themes related to identity arise in literature, drama or film, it's not uncommon to find mask motifs as well. So today we're going to discuss literal and metaphorical masks in Stevenson's novel and how they're linked to problems of identity. Okay, so let's get started. So let's start with the literal mask. So near the end of the text, we learn from Dr. Jekyll's personal writings, full statement of the case, that although he was initially able to control his transformation between personas using his chemical formula, he eventually lost control. He found that he would involuntarily change from Jekyll into Hyde after an arbitrary period of time, or during his sleep without taking the formula. This meant that with increasing frequency, he became trapped in his Hyde persona until he could take more of the solution, and he sometimes had difficulty getting supplies to make it. This is a problem because the Doctor's friends and servants only have a relationship with Jekyll. Further, about a year after Mr. Utterson meets him, the then missing Hyde is identified as the murderer of Sir Caro and can't be seen by anyone. To hide Hyde, excuse the pun, the Doctor is forced to become increasingly reclusive. When he does leave his cabinet, his laboratory office, he has to sneak around carefully wearing a mask. But he's not fooling anyone. He's not fooling anyone, however, especially not his servant of 20 years, Poole. In the middle of the novella, a terrified Poole brings Mr. Utterson to Jekyll's house to try to determine what's happening to the Doctor. Vehemently, he tells Utterson, "That thing was not my master, and there's the truth. My master is a tall, fine build of a man, and this was more of a dwarf. No, sir, that thing in the mask was never Dr. Jekyll. God knows what it was, but it was never Dr. Jekyll." Poole and Utterson also notice that the voice coming from Jekyll's cabinet is Hyde's. Apparently, the reckless Jekyll didn't come up with a very good contingency plan with his mask. He admits this in his notes. "It might indeed be possible to cover my face, but of what use was that, when I was unable to conceal the alteration in my stature?" It's clear that of the various faces the Doctor wears, the literal mask is by far the flimsiest, so the weakest. Right, okay, so as you can see, we have got a photo in the top right hand corner of a mask. Now this mask is from the Netflix series Money Heist. I don't know whether any of you have seen it, hopefully not because it's an 18. But I want you to answer a few questions anyway. So number one is, why do you think these people might be wearing masks? What is the primary purpose of wearing a mask? What's the point? For this question, it might help you to understand that the people wearing these masks in this photo are kind of gang members. That might help you answer that question. And number two, is the literal mask successful or not in the text? So in Jekyll and Hyde. I want you to discuss this using a piece paragraph structure. Okay, so basically these notes on the left hand side will help you answer question 2. And then we can move on. So now that we've looked at the literal mask, we can now look at metaphorical masks. So the lie of the half. The Doctor, or Jekyll, writes that even metaphorically, neither his Jekyll or his Hyde persona was really a mask. Each were authentic halves of himself. Though so profound a double dealer, I was in no sense a hypocrite. Both sides of me were in dead earnest. I was no more myself when I had laid aside restraint and plunged in shame, than when I laboured in the eye of day at the furtherance of knowledge or the relief of sorrow and suffering. However, because each of his personas operate independently of one another, neither represents the entire man. This means that when the Doctor is in either persona, that persona is a false representation of his character as a whole. Dr. Jekyll can't be prosecuted for the crimes of Mr. Hyde because everyone is deceived into thinking that these are two different men. Thus, each of them represents a kind of mask or facade that hides his full identity. Okie dokie. So we're now going to move on to the unnerving mask of Mr. Hyde. So have you ever worn a scary mask for Halloween that worked a little too well? Frightening masks are usually deformed in an obvious way, and they have a way of making people shudder even when they know that a presumably harmless person is underneath them. Those who interact with Hyde, even briefly, have a similar and unilateral reaction, and that is revulsion. So after his first encounter with Hyde, Utterson is the picture of disquietude. He observes that Hyde is pale and dwarfish, gives an impression of deformity without any nameable malformation, and has a displeasing smile. He even goes so far as to muse himself, "Oh, my poor Harry Jekyll, if ever I read Satan's signature upon a face, it is on that of your new friend." Hyde isn't disturbing merely because he's short, pale, or ugly. He's unnerving to behold because he is the face of evil, and people can sense the malevolence of his character. Okay, so I've got another task for you. So can you remember the video about the link to Genesis that we did a couple of videos ago? So that would be lesson video 18, if you haven't seen it. How does this quotation link to our context about Genesis and Adam and Eve? So this quotation is what I'm talking about, the one about Satan. How can we link that to Genesis and Adam and Eve? Okay, let's move on. Okay, the disappearing mask of Dr. Jekyll. So in his notes, the Doctor writes that I was slowly losing hold of my original and better self and becoming slowly incorporated with my second and worse. Little by little, the persona or mask of Jekyll begins to disappear as Hyde grows more powerful. Eventually, it is only by a great effort as of gymnastics and only under the intermediate stimulation of the drug that he is able to wear the countenance of Jekyll. Note that Jekyll uses the word wear, which is appropriate for describing this persona like a mask or facade. Brilliant, so make some notes on that. As you can see, I've highlighted the key quotations in blue. Once you've done that, I want you to answer this question. So, what else is interesting about this quote? Are there any words that stand out? And why do they stand out? So pause the video if you need to and just write a few sentences answering these questions. Okay, so let's move on to our apply section of the lesson. So we've got a mini quiz again, yay! So it's multiple choice and it's just to see whether you've understood today's new knowledge. So if you could answer these 4 questions and then I can put the answers up on Teams later on. Okay, let's just do a quick summary then. So let's review. So we've learnt that there are two kinds of masks in the novella, the literal and the metaphorical. As the Doctor increasingly loses hold of his Jekyll persona, he involuntarily becomes Hyde at inconvenient times and has to wear a mask to avoid being arrested for Hyde's crimes. However, he fools neither his servant Paul nor Utterson. The Doctor also wears two metaphorical masks. One is his Dr. Jekyll persona, and the other is his Mr. Hyde role. Although he claims that each is a genuine half of his true self, both are a false representation of his character as a whole. Hyde's face/mask is disturbing to others because it gives an impression of deformity and malevolence. And Jekyll's persona/mask begins to disappear as Hyde grows more powerful. So, could you please write down for me 3 things of your own that you have learnt from this lesson? These are the 3 that I've chosen. And then you are done. So again, if you've got any questions, do comment below or email me or ask me in Teams. And like this video if you want to, subscribe, whatever's best for you. So thanks for listening, and I look forward to seeing what you produce.